Do you still feel underwhelmed or disappointed with your photos after you've edited them in Photoshop? Well, it might be because you're making one or more of 5 big editing mistakes that can sneakily sabotage your results. So in this video, I'm revealing the simple fixes that I've taught thousands of photographers over the past 10 years to help them overcome these mistakes and feel confident in their editing. First, I'm going to show you a massive mistake you must avoid that can wreck your edits before you even open a photo in Photoshop. So imagine editing the same photo twice, each time making the exact same precise edits. Only one result was visibly lower quality than the other, especially in areas where there were smooth gradients between colors, like in a nice blue sky, for example. Like this, where both versions literally have the exact same edits made to them. But this one, the gradient in the sky looks nice and smooth, but this one has visible banding and weird blocky colors through the sky. And it's all because of one little tiny setting that you might never have even noticed because it's tucked away in a dark corner of Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. But the good news is it's an easy fix, so let me show you where it is in both apps. Now, if you use Lightroom before opening your photos into Photoshop, then here's where you can find it. Go to your Lightroom preferences in the menu, select External Editing, and then in this section, make sure you've got 16 bits selected in the dropdown, not 8 bits. The only difference between the two example edits I just showed you is that this one was done in 16-bit and the bad looking one was done in 8-bit. Now, I also recommend selecting ProPhoto RGB in this dropdown too for best results because it gives you the largest amount of colors to edit with in Photoshop. But the thing is, that can also lead to another mistake, which I'll show you how to fix next. But first, if you don't use Lightroom and instead open your RAW files in Camera Raw first before they go into Photoshop, then here's where you can find these same settings right at the bottom of the Camera Raw window in this tiny text. If you hover over it, you'll notice it's actually a link. Now, if it doesn't say ProPhoto RGB and 16-bit, then click that link to reveal these drop-down boxes where you can change it. Now, a word of warning, while it's best to select ProPhoto in this drop-down to give Photoshop as much color information as possible when editing your images, it does, like I said, create another mistake that I see people making all the time. And it's a bad one because it literally changes how your photos look after you've edited and shared them. So imagine this. You're a chef in a busy restaurant, Photoshop is your kitchen, and your photo is the dish that you're serving. But here's the twist. Each diner represents a different computer screen, and their taste buds control how each color is experienced. The problem? Well, everyone tastes colors differently, so the delicious flavors that you carefully crafted in the Photoshop kitchen might taste completely different by the time they hit the table. So what you really need is a magic pill that resets everyone in the restaurant's taste buds so that the dish tastes exactly how you intended, no matter who's eating it. Real chefs aren't so lucky, but for us photographers, that magic pill actually does exist. Just go to File, Export, and Export As in the menu, and then right down here, you'll see these two little checkboxes that are this magic pill to ensure your image is displayed the same to everyone, no matter how they're viewing it. So make sure they're both checked before you hit export, and you'll be sweet. But the thing is, fixing this will prevent a great edit from looking bad when other people view it. But if you're making any one of these next mistakes earlier on in your editing process, then it might not look that great to begin with. So let me show you what the first one of these next mistakes is and how it can make your photos look photoshopped. So imagine you're back in your Photoshop kitchen, cooking up a new recipe for the first time. You've got one shot at making a great tasting dish that you've never made before. Do you A, grab a handful of each ingredient, throw each one into the mix one by one and hope for the best? Or B, do you add a little bit of ingredient one, give it a taste, add a bit of ingredient two, give it another taste, add a little bit more of ingredient number one, and so on, making sure that it tastes great with every subtle addition? Because a mistake that leaves a lot of photos looking photoshopped in a bad way is when photographers use approach A. They open their RAW file, add a chunk of contrast, increase the saturation in one big hit, maybe brighten or darken the image in a global adjustment, and the result is an edit that looks either overcooked or underdone. So the mistake that you want to avoid if you want to create amazing edits that boost your photo's appearance in a big way without looking overcooked is doing too much in too few adjustments. So what do you do instead? Well, you can fix it by doing two things. One, make each adjustment do less, but do more of them to build up an effect gradually. And then two, use layer masks to apply each individual adjustment only to the areas of the image that it actually looks best in. So that brings me on to the next editing mistake that's responsible for photos looking overdone and crunchy, because in 99% of landscape photos, one of the best things you can do to make them pop more is increase contrast. But even if you are doing what I just told you about when it comes to making lots of small adjustments and masking them in only where needed, If you aren't paying attention, then you can still end up with images where the shadows become too dark, often completely black, because it can kind of sneak up on you. And when that happens, the image automatically looks over contrasty and photoshopped. So let me show you a quick and easy way to check if any shadows or highlights are at risk of becoming too dark or too light after each adjustment that you make. All you have to do is add a little known and even littler used adjustment layer labeled threshold. Then if you slide the slider all the way to the left, if you see any black pixels on the image, then they're definitely clipped, meaning they're pure black. Now, the cool thing is that you can actually keep this threshold layer and just turn it off and on whenever you like to make regular checks throughout your editing process. And you can use it in the same way to judge if highlights are being clipped to white too. Just move the slider all the way to the right this time, and if there's any white pixels in the black overlay, then you'll know that those pixels are too light. So this brings us on to mistake number 5, which when you fix it will also help you do an even better job of fixing mistakes 3 and 4 at the same time. It's probably the one single mistake that's actually most responsible for anyone's photos looking poorly and unprofessionally edited. Because the problem with doing selective adjustments using layer masks to control where you enhance color, contrast, or light, etc., is that with Photoshop's regular tools for doing this, it's actually really hard to do an accurate job, which means there's a good chance your masking becomes visible in the end result. For example, like a bright halo along a dark mountain that you've lightened but you couldn't accurately brush up to, but not over the edge of. Or gaps between fine details like tree branches when you want to lighten a tree without lightening the sky. Now the bad news is that to fix the mistake of inaccurate layer masking is actually a pretty long and complicated process, first to learn, but then also to remember how to use later. And the good news though is that I've created a free plugin that makes it easy to do in a couple of clicks. And you can download it from the link in the description and pinned comment. So there are 2 main ways to use the plugin, and I'll show you both, but let's start with how to make an adjustment that only affects the dark pixels in an image. So if you want to, say, brighten the dark shadows, or in other words, everything that's darker than middle grey, then you first click the -1 button here, and then you can go straight to adding a curves adjustment layer, and notice how it gets added with some stuff in its layer mask based on the button that you just clicked on the plugin. Next, you can make your curves adjustment, brightening the image, but see how it only affects the dark stuff. So that's a regular shadows adjustment, but what if you wanted to brighten only the very darkest shadows? Well, you do exactly the same thing, except first you click the -5 button. And if you want something in between the regular shadows and the darkest of dark shadows, then click a number between -1 and -5. But we're working with -5 for this example. So when you then add a curves adjustment after clicking -5, you'll see that the layer mask actually looks different to the last one because it's only actually now allowing the darkest shadows to be affected by this adjustment. Now, I did mention a second way to use the plugin, and that's what's going to help you recover pixels when an adjustment goes too far and clips something. So let's say I've added this contrast adjustment that's caused the darkest shadows to go too dark. Now I want to actually brush the adjustment out of those areas, but using a brush directly into the mask will be inaccurate. So first I can click one of the shadows buttons to load a selection containing the shadow pixels. Then I can take a black brush and use that through the selection like a stencil so that it controls where the paint of my brush is allowed to go in the mask. And the result is that my brush is masking this contrast effect out of the darkest areas, and even though my brush might touch other lighter areas of the image, the stencil prevents it from affecting those areas. Now, if you want to download this plugin for free, just click the link in the description or pinned comment, or watch this next video to see how the technique that it makes one click easy literally changed my life.